Okay, today we're going to continue with section 7.4. So let's take out our notebooks. At the top, we're going to put section 7.4, and today's topic we're looking at is factoring by GCF, or greatest common factor. So there's two important pieces we're going to look at for GCF, or greatest common factor. The first is the GCF, or greatest common factor, when we're trying to find a number. And what we have to determine there is what is the largest number that is a factor of, or that also means divides evenly into each number. And then we're also going to look at a few examples where we need to determine the GCF of variables. What we'll have to figure out there is what is the most number of variables the terms have in common. In common is what we're going to be focusing on. Now, let's try a few examples to find the GCF of each pair. So in example 1, write this down, we have 10 and 25, and we want to find the GCF between them. What I thought was going to be most helpful is if we find some factor pairs. We have to figure out what are things that multiply to 10. So things that multiply to 10, we can write down 1 and 10, and 2 and 5. Sometimes it's helpful to just write it in order from least to greatest. So things that multiply to 10 are 1, 2, 5, and 10. Now, same thing for 25. What are things that multiply to 25? Well, I said 1 and 25, and 5 and 5. So I just rewrote that in order from least to greatest, but I didn't have to rewrite the 5 twice. Now what we need to do is we need to find things that are going to be the greatest common factor, so what they have in common. So if we go look at the list, we can see they both have a 1 in common. But let's see if there's anything greater. They don't share a 2 in common. They share a 5 in common, and that looks like that's it. So here, the greatest common factor between 10 and 25 is the number 5. So we'll do a very similar problem in example 2. We want to find the GCF between 12 and 18. So just like before, I want to find the things that multiply to 12. So 1 and 12, 2 and 6, and 3 and 4. And all I did is I rewrote that in order from least to greatest just to help me stay organized. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 12. And then I did the same thing for 18. What are things that multiply to 18? I came up with 1 and 18, 2 and 9, and 3 and 6. I just wrote that in order from least to greatest. Once again, I have to figure out what is the greatest common factor. So what do they have in common? I can see they both share a 1 in common. Let's see if there's anything greater. They both share a 2 in common, a 3. They don't share a 4. They share a 6. And that looks like it. I want to take the greatest. So that means that my greatest common factor is 6. Now, we're going to follow very similar skills in examples 3 and 4, but now we're going to put some variables in. When our third example here is a to the third, b to the fifth, and a to the sixth, b to the first. Remember when we did laws of exponents, if we got stuck, we could kind of expand to help us simplify. So a to the third, b to the fifth, that just means that I have 3 a's and 5 b's. A to the sixth, b to the first means that I have 6 a's and 1 b. I'm still trying to figure out what we have in common. So let's see what we have in common. In terms of a's, they have 1a, or a to the first, 2 a's, which would give me a squared, and 3 a's, which would get me a to the third. Now if I look in terms of b's, they both have just 1 b in common. So here my greatest common factor would be a to the third b. If we're also looking at this and we don't want to expand every single time, I think we're going to take the lower of the exponents when we're comparing them with the same base. In example 4, we're putting all of those skills together. We're going to have to find the GCF between 40x to the third y squared and 24x to the fifth y. So think of it like a 2-part problem. We want to find the GCF between the numbers and then the GCF between our variables. So for 40, I started just like before. I made my kind of factor. What are things that multiply to 40? So 1 and 40, 2 and 20, 4 and 10, 5 and 8. And I just like to rewrite in order from least to greatest to help me stay organized. Same thing in 24. I wanted to think of things that are going to multiply to 24. So 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, 4 and 6. Remember, if we get stuck in the back of our notebook, we should have glued in that multiplication chart. So use that to help you. And I just rewrote that in order from least to greatest. Now let's determine what we have in common. They both share a 1. They both share a 2. They both share a 4. No 5. They both share an 8. And that seems like it's my greatest. So my greatest common factor number-wise should be 8. Now let's look at our variables. I'm comparing x to the third and x to the fifth. I want to see what they have in common or what they share. So x to the third is going to be what they share. And if I'm comparing the y's, I think I want to take the lower exponent, I have y squared and y to the first. I want to take the lower y to the first because that's how many they share. So my GCF is 8, x to the third, y to the first.